Interesting thing. We're all here because we have various interests in history, and for a lot of folks, history was not their most favorite subject in school. A lot of you might have thought the same thing. Maybe because we were young, or maybe because our teachers weren't that interesting. But I tell you what, from a very young age, I concluded that history was my most favorite subject. Is the twists and turns and the ups and downs, the romance and the courage and the duty and the sacrifice and the tragedy. All those things, you don't have to read nonfiction. You don't have to read fiction to get those things. I mean, nonfiction is, to me, so much more exciting. And when I first moved to Lake County, I just didn't realize how much exciting history Lake County had. I thought, I'll probably get in trouble for this, but I thought, oh, there's a few Indian tribes who just kind of hung out and did their thing, and there's not that much to learn about it. And some settlers came in. You got this, that. But I tell you what, the more I've been involved in Lake County history, there's layers and layers and layers of fascinating stuff. And the Historical Society has been such a big part of discovering and revealing so many of these stories. It certainly inspired me about this topic. This goes back some years ago where there was a picture book of Lake County history that came out. And being a big fan of the Civil War, I saw a picture of a Confederate naval officer in this Lake County history book, and it just caused me to think, what's he doing here? Why is a Confederate naval officer in Lake County history book? Well, it got me looking and turning the pages and doing more research. The gentleman's name was Captain Floyd, Richard Floyd. And I've done a few presentations about him and his relationship with James Lick and the Lick Observatory and how all that plays into part of the Lake County history and the lake in Yolo County. This is going to be kind of dovetailed on all that. So if you heard some of those other ones, a lot of this information is the same. But we're going to focus on another part of the story that I just, in the past, just kind of glossed over. And it's kind of interesting because on TV now, if you watch TV, there's some of the favorite shows are like forensic crime, cold case, opening up old cases and things and trying to find out, God, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, they decided this was the outcome of a crime, or maybe there wasn't a crime, and now all of a sudden they reopen the case and discover with DNA evidence and whatnot, maybe something did happen back then. Maybe we didn't get the story straight. So we're going to investigate that today about some of the situations about Harry Floyd. We're going to talk about, I'm going to build a little foundation here about who Harry Floyd was. Let's talk about her parents real quick. I already mentioned Richard, but let's talk about Harry's mother for a second. Her mother was a lady by the name of Cora Lyons. Cora was a gal who was born in Louisiana before the Civil War. And she was raised on what's called Oakley Plantation on the Mississippi River to a fairly successful family. And her mom's name was Eliza Perry. And Eliza, when she was a young girl, this is long before Cora was born, when Eliza was a young girl, her parents were looking for a tutor for Eliza. And down the river came a flatboat with a gentleman and his family going down to New Orleans. And they stopped at the plantation for overnight lodging. And they got to talking. This guy that was on this flat bed boat or whatever it was an educated man. And Eliza's father said, we'd sure like you to stay for a while because our daughter needs to be taught some things. And the guy says, I love this plantation because the wildlife here is exquisite, particularly the birds. So the guy stayed there for some time, and while he was teaching Eliza this, that, and the other thing, he was drawing pictures of the birds. And today, Oakley Plantation survived the Civil War and still there. And today it's known as Audubon State Park, because that man on that boat was Audubon. So you have this connection. History has these weird things. You start looking into this guy in this history book, and you find out that he was married to a gal whose mom had this close relationship to Audubon. Lots of intersections in history. So Eliza, she grows up, and she meets an older gentleman named Henry Augustus Lyons. And they're staying in the South before the Civil War. And unfortunately, at a young age, when Cora was only about 7 or 8, her mother Eliza passed away. And that led Harry, the father, to decide to come to California. I think about it, California had just become a state. We had just become free from Mexico, and the war with Mexico, I think, was over in 48. Then had the gold rush in 49, became a state in 1850. And Harry was an attorney. He was a big attorney in Louisiana, so he came here to practice law. So now we're a brand new state, and one of the many things the state needed was a Supreme Court. And because Harry Lyons was a rich man, because Harry Lyons was a gifted, intelligent man and known as a great attorney, he ends up being on the California's first state Supreme Court. So there's a good pedigree here that Cora has. She has a mom that was taught by Audubon. She has a dad on the state Supreme Court. He's also a good poker player, because the story has it where at some point he's playing poker, the stakes were real estate, and he wins the final hand and walked away with the deed of a mansion in San Francisco. So he was rich and just got richer with that. Now, the other parent, of course, Richard Floyd, he grew up in Camden County, Georgia, which is on the Atlantic coast. Well-to-do family. They got him in the Naval Academy in Annapolis. And then the Civil War started. Georgia seceded, and he resigned his commission to serve his state. And soon he was a member of the Confederate States Navy. Ultimately, the Confederate States Navy purchased some naval vessels from England, and one of them became the CSS Florida. It became a surface raider, crisscrossed the Atlantic Ocean looking for merchant marine of the United States, and it ended up sinking like 60 ships. So the U.S. Navy was crisscrossing the Atlantic looking for the CSS Florida and other Confederate surface raiders, and he found it down in Bahia, Brazil, where they sank the Florida. Long story, I won't go into it, but basically Richard Floyd became a POW out of all that. They brought it back to the United States. But because the incident happened in Neutral Harbor, Brazil protested and they forced the release of all the POWs. So Richard made it back to England just as the war ended in hopes to get yet another Confederate vessel, but the war ended. At that point he learned that his home in Georgia was destroyed, and his family dispersed and or dead. So rather than coming back to Georgia, he goes, makes his way through the Isthmus of Panama, comes up via Mexico to San Francisco, where he meets, I think it's either Thomas or John Fraser. I get them mixed up, but one of the two Fraser brothers, and is trying to look for work there, and he's directed to his other brother that was up here in Lake County. So Richard Floyd came up to Lake County for work, and it's just one of those things that I think a lot of us can relate to. Once you come over the hills and see the lake, for some of us it was a breathtaking moment. It was like love at first sight. We got here, we took a breath of fresh air, and this became home almost instantaneously. That happened to Richard Floyd. He walked around and rode his horse around the lake and just thought this was God's heaven on earth. Even though later he got a job back in San Francisco on a ship going back and forth to Hawaii, he always had a dream of coming home. So he's in San Francisco after his stint here in Lake County, and he's on a cruise liner thing going back and forth to Hawaii. Meantime, Harry and his now of age daughter, very beautiful Cora, they decide to go to Hawaii, and they get on the same boat that Captain Floyd is now captain of. And because they're Southern, and because Captain Floyd has this reputation of being on the CSS Florida, and they kept in track of the exploits of the Florida. One thing led to another, and Captain Floyd meets Cora, and they fall in love, and they get married. And it wasn't long afterwards that Harry Augustus Lyons passes away, leaving his estate entirely to Cora. And now they have funds and freedom, and he brings Cora to Lake County, and she too falls in love with Lake County. She comes over the hill, has the same experience he did. Honey, this is it. We're living here. Let's find a spot. And the spot they located was what's today the Conatai subdivision between Glen Haven and Lucerne. There's about 60, 70, 80 homes over there, and somewhere on the channel, somewhere on the lake, some are just kind of tucked away. And they built, for what I was told at the time, was the biggest, nicest mansion in Lake County. Now remember, there's no highway 20 at that time, so everything was coming across via boat. And he built this beautiful mansion on all the acreage around there, going up the hill. There was a spring up at the top of the hill. He engineered it to where he could bring it down to a man-made pond, and there was a valve he could turn on for a 50-foot geyser if he wanted. The guy was a very gifted, very talented, very inspired by things, and had the ability, the vision, and the resources to make a lot of things come true. And he went about going around the world bringing back non-native vegetation to his mansion, some of which still survives to this day. The CCNRs up there explicitly state the remaining plants and trees of the Floyds that survived cannot be removed without going through a very complicated process. So they keep them tracked of which ones are still there that were planted by the Floyds, and some of them still survive. Well, later, Mr. Floyd, Captain Floyd, is chosen to build James Lick's observatory. James Lick was a rich miser from the San Francisco, San Jose area, one of the richest men in the United States at the time, definitely the richest west of Mississippi. The largest hotel west of Mississippi was the Lick Hotel in San Francisco. Very centric man, and we realized his life was ending. He had some strokes. He knew his time wasn't going, his time was short. His first idea was to build a pyramid downtown San Francisco, bigger than anything in Egypt. That's where he was going to be buried. But he got talked out of that, and instead they said, why don't you build a observatory and make the world's greatest telescope? And that's what he agreed to do. So on Mount Hamilton outside San Jose, above San Jose, they started leveling off the mountain and building this very modern, expensive observatory. And they chose Richard Floyd to be the general manager on that. He was the guy that basically put that together, which was very difficult and kept him away from home a lot. They got it done. Meantime, him and Cora had a baby, and they named the baby after the grandfather, Harry Augustus Lyons. They named her Harry Augustus Lyons. So her first name was Harry, but Harry Augustus Lyons, the acronym is HAL, H-A-L, so they named her, nickname was Hal. So her friends and family called her Hal, but her given name was Harry. So anyway, he's only now in his mid to late 40s, and the work that, the effort put forth on this Mount Hamilton Observatory project, it wore out Richard pretty severely, where he passed away. He got sick and just worn out, and at like age 47, gone. And that put Cora into a tizzy because they were very close. So her grief absolutely consumed her and affected her health, to where now she was susceptible to getting something, and she got some sort of typhoid thing. She died just like 3 or 4 months later. So now you have a young teenage Harry, the girl, Hal. She inherits a great fortune. She inherits the Konatai estates. At this point, they owned Corcus Ranch. They owned many parcels in Lakeport. They owned property in San Francisco, several mansions. It was a very wealthy family, and now she is the inheritance person for all that. So she starts making some friends. She was known as a very generous, outgoing person. Most people liked her. She formed a friendship with a lady by the name of Eliza, same name as her mom, or her grandma, I guess, Eliza Pritchard. There was a lady named Eliza Pritchard. My understanding is Eliza was quite a bit older, but so it was almost like a second mom to her. It's just somebody who kind of took her, but she also kind of related to her too, and they became good friends. So Eliza became like a new parent to her. Harry had the opportunity to get trained in a lot of good schools and things, but she grew up a tomboy. She was very much a tomboy and very much into, I guess I can relate to a lot of today's kids when they get into their fantasy video games. If you have grandkids, that sometimes that's all they do, and they slip into a world of fantasy. She loved the Three Musketeers and the author that did that, Count of Monte Cristo, those type of books. And when she would actually read those books so many, she could recite almost the entire book by heart. And she knew what every line was, every character was. So what she enjoyed doing most was playing the part of one of the characters. She would pick one of the characters, and for that day or week, she would be that character. And her friends knew what she was up to, and they thought it was kind of fun. They played along with her. But if you were just company who were just meeting her for the first time, you'd say, "Hello, Harry," and she'd say, "No, I'm Aretha," or whatever, one of the Three Musketeers. She insisted on being called that person of that who she was playing that week. So as you can imagine, a lot of people walked away thinking, the girl's a little goofy, because we all kind of goof around a little bit, but she took it to an extreme. And this went on for years. She had this extraordinary fascination playing characters in these books to an extraordinary degree. So she's growing up, and people are wondering, is she going to get married? Who's she going to marry? They're seeing her with rich young men, and the gossip rags of the time are saying Harry's dating so and so. This rich guy's coming to San Francisco, but she isn't married. She gets in her 20s. Now she's approaching 30. Now they're thinking a scandalous rumor that maybe her and Eliza Pritchard are a couple, because they're always seen together, and they all seem to kind of be in their own little world, and they thought, well, maybe that's why she's not married. And they said, okay, whatever. And it was San Francisco, but, so that was what was thought. And that's where Harry was at this point in time. Now we're getting like past 1900. Now let's hold this story about Harry for a second, and let's go to Serbia, over in the Balkan Peninsula. The other part of the story starts there. Serbia, which was independent for a long time after the Roman Empire collapsed, Serbia, the Serbians and Slavic people there, they finally got their own Serbian empire. They had their own dynasty going on. And all of a sudden, out from the east came the Islamic, Turkish, Ottoman hordes trying to break through into Europe. They were trying to get through Constantinople and take over Europe, and that was their goal. And for a long time, it was Christian Europe trying to stop the Ottoman hordes from Turkey and beyond. Well, one day they didn't take Constantinople quite yet, but they slipped around it, and they were taking over much of the Balkan Peninsula before Constantinople even fell. Serbia, the Serbs there were fighting them, and there was a famous Serb named Stefan Dušan, and he was like one of their last great kings, and he was very successful in holding off the Ottoman Turks. When 1355, he died, and his successor didn't have the talent, and it was not long after that Constantinople fell, and the Ottoman Turks just swarmed all through the Balkan Peninsula and ultimately made all the way to Vienna and Budapest, and they were finally pushed back, but they basically hung on to that area for over 400 years. And so the Dušan dynasty ended, but now the people, the descendants, are still around. They're like in exile, waiting for the day to come home. Well, hundreds of years goes by, and now you got guys saying, well, I'm a descendant of Dušan, and one day we're going to take back the royal throne. That's their thing. That keeps them going. It's kind of like returning to Jerusalem type thing. So this is going on for a long time. Well, jumpstart all the way to 1830 or 1800s, and Serbia people start rebelling against the Turks. And a guy named Milos Obrenović, he leads a successful revolt that essentially gets Serbia its independence from the Ottoman Empire, right around 1835. And he decides, because he was primarily responsible for leading the Serbs, that we do need a dynasty, whereas a lot of people were saying, let's locate the true descendants of Dušan. He's saying, no, let's start a new dynasty, it's going to be me. And he's got the army, so he becomes the new king. Which the Dušan descendants aren't really happy with it. Now keep in mind that Dušan, by now, the descendants have intermarried and spread down to different families and things. And one of the family descendant names is Gopičević. So the Gopičevićs can trace their lineage back to Stefan Dušan. But because they were dispersed, they couldn't come home. The Turks would kill them. They would be the leaders of a revolution. So the Dušan descendants kind of like a diaspora across the world. And some came to America. Some came to San Francisco. One of them was named after this first guy that took over in 1835. His name was Milos Obrenović. And at first he was a hero, because he gave Serbia their independence. It wasn't until he declared himself king that some Serbs said, whoa, you can't do that. But when he was a hero, a lot of kids were named after him. His name was Milos. So the Kopčević family named one of their kids Milos Kopčević. But as a descendant of the Dušan dynasty, the new king didn't want any of them around. So he made sure they would stay dispersed. So here you got this new dynasty, and these people around the world going around saying, well, I'm royalty, I'm Serbian royalty, and one day we're going to take over, back over in Serbia. Just give us an opportunity, we're going to do that. Because this guy's a usurper. He was a hero, but he took over too much.